of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ed, we change your seat. All right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. Board members, make sure your mics are on so everybody can hear you. We have a roll call tonight. Everyone's here, but Mr. DeLuca, he's not feeling well tonight. And we're to the approval of the agenda. Everyone has the agenda in front of them. If there's any additions or deletions? If not, the agenda stands as presented. Tonight we have two presentations tonight, and with our auditor, Joe is here, somewhere there he is right over there, so I'm going to turn it right over to you, sir.
All right. First, I'd like to thank the board for allowing us to serve as your audit firm. It very much is a pleasure working with the township staff. Maybe I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Joe Berlin from Gabridge & Company. I'm the principal in charge of the audit. Throughout the audit process, we received financial statements, trial balances, and all the supporting schedules that we needed to go through and verify the revenues, expenditures, the assets and liabilities of the township. And throughout the audit process, we didn't have any adjusting journal entries. Everybody was very prompt providing the information to us, very courteous. The information was accurate, it was timely, and accordingly, in this entire basically 40-page audit report, what matters the most is our opinion. And you can find that at the very bottom of page 1. And it's referred to as an unmodified opinion, which doesn't sound flattering, but it's actually the highest level of opinion that we can render. It's a clean opinion. And we write that in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly the financial condition of the township as of March 31st, 2017. So it should always be the township's goal to receive an unmodified opinion, but it does mean something to earn it. We've had organizations with more resources at their disposal that have had some level of modified or adverse opinion. So it certainly means something to achieve it. Controls are effectively designed and are being carried out effectively on a day-to-day basis, and ultimately lead to the accurate and timely financial statements that are being provided to the board throughout the course of the year. Moving through the rest of the audit report, starting on page 4, we get into management's discussion and analysis. I would consider this to be the Cliff Note version of the audit report. It's about 7 pages of financial highlights, comparative financial statements, so you can see how the township did in 2016 compared to 2017 to give a little bit of historical context to the numbers. And it also has a brief narrative explaining some of the significant changes in revenues, expenses, assets, and liabilities for each of the past 2 fiscal years. So it's just kind of written in a way to kind of get quickly to the point and provide some useful information, some key ratios that the readers should be aware of. So starting on page 4, I'm going to walk through the financial highlights. We've got 3 bullet points. The first one shows that the assets exceed the liabilities of the township as of March 31st, 2017 by $15,581,171. That is on the accrual basis of accounting. So if we were to quantify all of the infrastructure and buildings and vehicles of the township, and we back off all of the related liabilities, it gets us to $15.5 million. It's a theoretical number because obviously what that number represents is, in theory, how much would be left over if all of the infrastructure and assets would be sold, all the liabilities paid off. We'd expect there to be about $15.5 million, but obviously it's very much theoretical. When we back off the infrastructure and the capital assets of the township, we get to an unrestricted net position of $10,074,607 as of March 31st, 2017. That's a much more liquid, much more tangible number to look at as of year end. Second bullet point down, now we get into the general fund. And this is, I would get in trouble if anybody from the Governmental Accounting Standards Board was here, but I would call this cash basis accounting. So how much cash or very liquid resources does the township have at its disposal at the end of last fiscal year to cover its immediate obligations? So we're backing off any infrastructure, we're backing off any long-term liabilities, and we're looking at just very short-term focus assets and liabilities in fund balance, what's left over. So in the general fund, the township has $9,619,830 of unassigned fund balance, and that number is an increase of $348,112 during the year ended March 31st, 2017. So in other words, total cash and resources in exceeded the cash and resources out by $348,000. And the third bullet point down just gives us an idea of what the liquidity of the general fund is. And that $9.6 million of unassigned fund balance is about 393% of the annualized expenditures and transfers out of the general fund. Anything north of 100% is fairly common for townships, especially given the large nature of some of the expenditures that can come up, whether it be road repairs or improvements, things of that nature. So very healthy, stable financial condition as of March 31st, 2017 for the township. Next, if you turn to page 7, we get into the comparative financial statements for the township. This flips back to the long-term focus of accounting, or the accrual basis. And just a couple quick rows I wanted to point out. First, the top 2 rows, cash and cash equivalents, increased from $610,733 as of March 31st, 2016. You can see that in the upper right-hand corner. And if you go one column over to 2017, you can see that number increased $188,865 to $799,598. So a healthy increase in cash and equivalents. The very next row down, the investments for the township increased from $8,433,007. It increased by $218,854 to $8,651,861. So a healthy increase, not only in cash, but also in investments for the township. And the last item that I wanted to point out is the second row up from the bottom. The unrestricted net position for the township increased from $9,821,043 to $10,074,607. So not only did cash increase, but the unrestricted net position showed a healthy increase of about $250,000 during the year ended March 31st, 2017. Next, if you turn to page 8, just a couple quick items I wanted to point out here. We're still on the accrual basis of accounting, and you can see 3 rows up from the bottom in the total government column for 2017. The township had a $296,121 increase in net position. I would think of that as being net income. If we were in the corporate world, that's how we would refer to that increase as net income. So certainly good to see increasing. Not only did we see on the short-term basis the total fund balance increased, but on the long-term basis of accounting, the total net position is showing a similar increase as well, getting the township to $15,581,171 as of year end. So again, a healthy increase there. And navigating through the rest of the report, if you want to turn to page 32, we get into the footnote section of the audit report. Frequently with our townships, when we see larger, or when we see balances of cash and deposits and investments north of $250,000, it's not uncommon to have some level of uninsured cash. And that custodial credit risk deposit paragraph, it's the third sentence. We can see that as of year end, the township has $254,514 of uninsured cash. When we take into consideration the $9.5 million of cash and investments, that's a very prudent number. So there's very little uninsured cash that the township has at its disposal. In other words, the township is diversifying its investments, it's diversifying its deposits within multiple banking institutions to do a very good job of managing that FDIC insurance coverage risk. So just quickly wanted to point that out. The only other thing that I wanted to mention, and this is a result of us at least taking a look at some of the key controls for the township. So throughout the audit process, the only thing that we as auditors are rendering an opinion on is the financial condition of the township, whether or not the finances are presented accurately in all material respects. we don't necessarily render an opinion on internal control, but we certainly need to evaluate the controls that the township has in place. If we see a control that is either ineffectively designed, or maybe it's properly designed but not being carried out effectively on a day-to-day basis, we are required to put that in writing and bring that to the attention of the board. And I'm happy to say that the township, again, largely as a result of accurate financial statements, of all the checks and balances that are in place to make sure that there's independent review of key transaction classes, we did not have any findings that merited the attention of the board, which really is just kudos to the staff, to the board, in terms of making sure that there are appropriate checks and balances in place to safeguard the assets of the township. So just wanted to quickly point that out, and I'm more than happy to answer any further questions that the board might have.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Any questions, board members? Trent?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Joe, I've got one question regarding the transfer out that's referenced on page 11, page 31, and a note on page 35, note 5 for the interfund activities. The monies that were utilized to help subsidize the sewer fund this past year, once our bond payments are completed, one bond being next year, the last bond in 2022, are we required to replace those monies from the sewer fund to the general fund, or do we have the luxury with our cash position to not reimburse the general fund?
There is no formal requirement to repay those funds from the sewer fund back to the general fund, given that those general fund dollars are unrestricted in nature. So once those final debt service payments are covered, there is not a formal requirement for the sewer fund to transfer that back.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Supervisor,
Yes.
if I may, it probably doesn't make any difference from an accounting standpoint, but Joe, I'd just like to point out that your note 10, contingent liability, you make reference to the fact that the township has been in various lawsuits. There's actually one lawsuit that I'm aware of, so again, it probably doesn't make any difference from an accounting standpoint, but just so nobody in the township that gets concerned that we have numerous lawsuits against the township, we only have one that I'm aware of.
Okay, sure.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, board members? Joe, we appreciate it. I think things have been going very well, and watching our spending, and we're in good shape. So, thanks, Joe.
All right, thank you very much. Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Next on our presentation, we have Matthew Bertrand, and he's going to talk about the rain gardens. And he's talked to Sue Beach and couldn't be here tonight, so she's well supports this, and so we'd like to hear your presentation at this time. Matthew?
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good to see a good turnout tonight. So I am with Friends of the Rouge. My name is Matthew Bertrand. My title is the Non-Point Source Pollution Project Coordinator, which is a mouthful. And I got into that position by studying landscape architecture at the University of Michigan. It's really a fancy way of saying that my job is about making sure that our landscapes, that our communities, are designed in such a way that we're maintaining river health as well. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about tonight, to talk about rain gardens. So I'm going to talk about a few things. The major reason I'm here is that we're proposing a demonstration rain garden at the Township Hall. So right out there, in front of the fire station out there. You can see it pictured right up here, the spot that we're looking at doing. So today I'm here to introduce just what exactly a rain garden is, what some of the challenges that we're experiencing with Johnson Creek are, and then how rain gardens can help solve that. So before I go any farther though, I just want to kind of gauge the audience. Have any of you actually heard of a rain garden before? Just raise your hand. Okay, there's a couple. And I actually have a couple plants in the front row who are very shy about raising their hands there. I've got John and Patricia who are here tonight. They're Salem Township residents. They're actually master rain garden volunteers. And so I'm going to be telling you more about what that is in just a little bit. But I'm very glad to see that it's more than just the three of us, so it's a good sign. All right, so what I want you to remember about a rain garden is that it's beautiful, that it solves problems, and that it saves rivers. And I want you all to think about what it would take for a rain garden to be a part of your life as you move forward in the next 5 years. So first, solving problems. So if you have icy sidewalks or a flooded basement or floods in your community, a rain garden can help with that. And I can't necessarily help with a hurricane scale flood. It's a little beyond what my portable gardens can do. But in terms of what we see in Southeast Michigan, that's a little bit more something I can handle. They're also a very attractive part of great gardens potentially. So here's a picture from Midwest Living back in 2013, and I challenge any of you to even see where the rain garden is in that picture. But they can be a gorgeous part of anyone's gardens. And lastly, they're really essential for the health of our river systems, for Johnson Creek especially. So what is it exactly then? A rain garden is like any garden you've ever seen. Think about your favorite garden. It's the exact same thing, except it's upside down. So rather than planting on a mound or planting on a slope, instead we flip it and we plant on a shallow saucer. And we send to that saucer stormwater. So you can see from up here, our gutter systems are being piped into this shallow depression here, where it infiltrates and it slowly seeps out into our creek systems in a very healthy system. In contrast with what you can see over here, which is more typical, where those impervious surfaces, so impervious surfaces where water doesn't soak in, where it instead flows into our streets and then into our drains, and then from there, where does it go? Into our river system. Yeah, this is not a healthy thing, and I'm going to share with you now why that's the case. So here's Salem Township. And you can see your place in the Rouge up here. So you were all fortunate enough to live close to Johnson Creek, which is the highest quality tributary to the Rouge by far. So congratulations to everyone in this room. You live in a really amazing place. It's the only cold water tributary to the Rouge. It's one of the few places where we find high quality sensitive species. And it's just a really special place. And it's a place that deserves protection. And rain gardens are one of the ways that we can do that. So to think about how these little gardens are helping, we need to think about the relationship between our land cover and our river systems. So this is showing more of a natural system back from before development days, where when it would rain, it wouldn't typically run off into our rivers. Instead, it would soak in slowly through this living sponge of soil. And then it would seep out gently and slowly over the course of the year in a very controlled way. Whereas when we start developing, so when we start to see about 10% impervious surfaces, instead that water rushes off into the creek immediately, rather than soaking in like it used to. And we start to see more pollution in these systems, in that runoff, and we start to see flashiness. So high times, during the rainstorms when the water's high and it's scouring these banks, and then during periods of drought, low times, when we've got these sandbars where sediment is deposited. That's not as healthy of a system. And then as we start getting into more dense areas, 40% impervious and beyond, our systems really suffer. So no longer do we have living river systems, instead we have dead pipes. This is essentially what our rivers are operating as. They're getting a lot of pollutants, brakes from your cars, oils from your cars, all kinds of pollutants, and all that water just scours through the river. It's a very unhealthy system. It's not what we want to see. So when we look at Salem, you can see this is a chart showing imperviousness levels. So much of the Salem area is at 2%, which is really good. And then as we get over to here, we're getting to 5 to 8%, which is not as good. That starts to cause some problems there. It's part of the reason why we don't see brook trout as much anymore in Johnson Creek. And then it gets a little bit worse as we get more into denser areas. So it's especially in these areas where rain gardens are a great way for us to act more like a 2% area, even when we still have impervious. So here is an example when I'm talking about imperviousness of what I'm talking about. So this is just outside the Township Hall. Roads, sidewalks, parking lots, roofs. Water can't soak in anymore like it used to. It's got to go somewhere. And so here is, again, another spot on the Township Hall, so out front. And this is the spot I'm looking at doing a rain garden. You can see all this imperviousness from the access for the fire trucks, and then the roofway itself, and then you can't see the roads over here. The water all ends up going right here, and you can see it actually kind of has a bit of a puddling mess right now as it is. So what I would look at doing is right here in the green, basically we'd be installing a rain garden where we guide this water in there where it would soak into the ground instead of running off into the creek system. So what would it look like though, right? So you saw the shape there roughly. It can look like really whatever you want to design it as. So it can be just turf grass, if the soils are right, or it can be a wild native plant space. What we're actually striving for, though, is something that's more in between, that looks like a garden space. We're trying to make a space that's so attractive that everyone who drives by says, what is that, and how do I get one in my house? So something more like that, where we've got structure from a fence, we've got well-mulched areas, we've got turf grass borders that are well-mowed and well-maintained. So something kind of along those lines. So here's an example of a backyard rain garden, a guy named Dale Sass. So you can see just an example here, how it's connected into his patio system. He's got his roof gutters guided into this rain garden right there. Actually, there it is right there. So that water is being managed on site. Here's a front yard rain garden. So there's a nice turf grass area right here, and then the gutter downspout comes down, and we've got a little infiltration area right over here. So attractive garden spaces, they're beautiful and they function. They provide essential function, and it's costly function to provide other needs. So in summary, so here is the spot where we're looking at building. This is one of 9 demonstration sites that I'm looking to build to help protect Johnson Creek and Tonquish Creek as well. We're also looking at the Northville Art House as a location, Plymouth Municipal Yard, Moraine Elementary School potentially, and many, many more. We're also going to be offering the Master Rain Gardener Training Program, which is what Patricia and John took, as a way to teach you all how to build these, and also to help build a resource of people who can help others to teach how to install these things. And lastly, we're going to fund 13 private rain gardens as well, 50% funding, so we can start to see more of these throughout our community. So that's kind of something to look forward to coming up. So in summary, rain gardens are beautiful. They solve problems and they save our river systems. And so I really would like to encourage you all to support this rain garden that we're proposing for the Township Hall, and to ask yourself, what would it take, 5 years in the future for me to have a rain garden at my house to help protect Johnson Creek. So thank you all very much for your time and attention today, and I hope to work with you in the future.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. Board members, any questions for Matt?
How large of an area is this demonstration project?
About 800 square foot would be about the maximum. The actual size would be the result of the design process. Go back. That shows roughly what it would be in terms of its scale in relation to the rest of the landscape there. So you'd have mostly turf grass in this area. It'd be right in this area border behind the fence where we'd be looking at putting it. And I would try to make sure, I would be the designer for this, and there would be an open design process as well to try to make sure that what it looks like would be what we want in this space.
Do you have to go back through and dig up the solid blue clay that we have prevalent around here and put sand in there, or how deep do you have to go? Or some of the constraints that you have to have?
Potential soil is one of the most significant factors. We will do a soil test to see what exactly you have here. If it is solid clay 6 feet down, then yes, we would probably have to do some amendments to the soil. That said, you can have a rain garden in the worst of clay. It's just going to be a question of how long it takes to thrive. Once you get it planted with plants that can survive in that water system, they end up punching through the clay with the roots so the water can soak in, and they also breathe the water into the atmosphere. And so after about 3 years when those plants are large, you start to see these things function much better. So if we find the worst case scenario of all clay super deep, we'll have a plan to work around that. Anyone else?
Yeah, can you tell me, like, if someone if they make one at their residence, is there an approximate cost per square foot?
I think I've seen $8 maybe, but it's really, those numbers aren't very helpful. If you have the time to design it yourself, and if you've got gardener friends who can help donate the plans, it can cost you essentially nothing. Or you can, and I assure you, you can make these things as expensive as you want them to be. If you want to hire a landscape architect and do a world-class design, you can make it spectacular. So typically most people will do something a little bit smaller than that, and it really would cost about the same as just any garden you would install. Because again, this is like any other garden, it's just slightly different in terms of the shape.
Okay. Any other questions for Matt? Bonnie?
I have some questions. First, you mentioned the Maureen Elementary. I believe you said that. Where is that?
That's in Northville Township.
Okay.
It's on 8 Mile.
We immediately caught that. I asked where the heck that was because that's not part of Salem. And the second thing is, if you go for this, did you take into consideration that you do have a lawn care system of people here and they have to be consulted, whether it's going to cost us more to go around it or not, or how that's going to work?
That's an essential design component. You want to make sure that you're not making it so that like the turf area is so small that their big riding mowers can't get in there, or if you've got like really tight corners where it's hard for them to work around. So that would be a part of the design phase, would be finding out more about how the lawn is being managed right now, who's doing it, what the systems that they've got are, and to make sure that what we put in place would be something that would function. So that's a great question.
There are many drains in that area you're talking about, even the drain that drains this building. So if they're talking about building something out there, and it drains the fire department, everything drains in that drain that you're talking about. If you're gonna dig it out, I think you're gonna run into drains.
And so the first thing you'd be doing is calling NISTIG just to find out about any underground utilities, but oftentimes those drains aren't in there. And so that would be where, as much as possible, I'd be consulting existing plans to see if we can pinpoint exactly where those pipes are and to work around them as best we can. Some of those pipes, though, we might be able to actually cut them and have them pop up.
You have to
Pop up
remember that every building that's got a basement in it, in the hamlet area, it's got water problems.
Okay, yeah, the place is not, I'm actually buying a house right now that has water problems. So had to become an expert on basements lately. What we want to do is get them about 10 foot away from the house. There's so many people have their gutters just depositing that water right next to the house, and that's where you start getting the flooding problem coming in. And so, you don't have to put a rain garden in to solve basement flooding, you just have to get the water away. But while you're installing a rain garden, typically people will put in good systems to get the water that 10-foot distance away. So that's how we end up solving
You
basement
have a
flooding.
place to go, you can get a drain that goes down into the Johnson Creek. But it has to come from this area right here down there.
Yeah, we're trying to keep it out of those drainage systems as much as we can and soaking into the ground, away from basements in a way that's healthy for the river.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, what's the cost of this for the township?
Oh, so I actually have funding from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. And so the thing that we would ask from the township would be help with the actual site excavation part. And then we have funding that covers the soil amendments, plants, mulch, my design time, which would be one of the biggest costs. So it would be a minimal cost to the township.
Who's gonna take care of it once you guys are all gone?
That's actually where that Master Rain Gardener program comes in a little bit. So we'll be providing 3 years of solid maintenance support. That's the most essential period, especially if there's clay soils. We want to make sure those plants survive to maturity, and then they will outcompete the weeds that are in the area, so it'll be a lot less maintenance at that point. And I'll be aiming to support a volunteer crew to be able to help maintain it once a year where there will be weeding that will be required for it. So it'll be minimal maintenance after those 3 years, and we'll support it to get to that.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I think the main issue is the way that it's constructed as opposed to a regular garden, and I think that's, the way it's constructed to absorb that water and to purify it as it dissipates it.
Yeah, that just minor storage of the 3 to 6 inches, it gives us just so much more resilience as a community to keep the water in place rather than depending on the flowing systems. Yeah, and then soaking into the soils. Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
This is not to really keep the water from puddling up there. This is to keep the water that puddles up there more pure, more filtered, correct?
Yeah.
So it's not going to take that puddle out of that corner. It's just going to make that puddle a little cleaner in that corner.
Not quite, we're gonna move that puddle from here to there, where it's gonna soak in rather than sitting as a puddle.
But there are drains along there that are supposed to take care of that, supposed to run into the drains and out.
So it's possible that I missed a drain or two while I was out there, but if there are drains, I actually want to keep the water out of those drains, because typically those drains are then going, again, straight into the river system. So it's possible that they're just clogged up
There's
right
a drain
now.
up and down that road. You can, wherever the manhole cover was, it was off all the way down to the river.
Okay. Well, we're trying to keep the water out of those drains and from puddling here and soaking into the ground right there is the idea. So I don't know if I quite answered your question there. Sorry.
Okay, all right, Bill?
Would it then be fair to perhaps speak of this as a septic system for our runoff rather than letting the runoff just go pollute the world?
That's an interesting way to think about it. I might take a day or two to chew on that to see if there's any problems with that.
You may should.
That's all right.
You
Thank
may
you.
borrow the phrase, should it become one you enjoy.
I'm not sure septic systems are my best selling point. That's not what I want to talk about all the time.
Modify it slightly, but you get the point. What you're attempting to do is keep the pollutants that you don't want into the systems, into an area where the plants and such can take care of them and convert them.
And I mean, you could look at that also as like, that is a significant improvement over what we used to do, with cesspools and such. It's not perfect, but it does the job pretty darn well. And it's solving the community problems, through private effort. Yeah.
Okay.
Are you basically just running a drain tile from the gutters down into that?
So what I will likely do is guide the water along this swale. So this is
Yeah.
kind of a conducting swale, and dig this out deeper in this area, guide the water back into here.
Okay,
And
but
so-
is your drain tile sitting above ground? Or are you
no, I
gonna
don't
put
think
that
so.
below?
Yeah,
Because in the
all the
last
drains-
picture I saw, you had, the drain tile was above and it was running into your garden.
Yeah, it's going to be different with every situation. So what I observed here is that most of these are going underground, and I'm not actually sure where they're going, but the amount of water that's coming off of just this apron here is sufficient in terms of what I can be managing with this size of garden.
Okay.
So really just even capturing the surface drainage off of that apron, and also off of the roadway itself. That roadway has got some pretty heavily polluted water that's coming off. So the waters that are kind of concentrated right here in this, and sorry, this isn't the best of pictures, in this swale area right now, having that coming back into the garden and soaking in. I could then actually also have a garden more out in front. That would actually be easier for me to do, but then that would be getting into just a design question of what do we think actually looks good in the community here. Do we want it to be right out in front of the fence, where it's really on display, or do we want to have the fence providing kind of a structure, the frame for the garden? And that's actually an open question.
The other issue that I may have is the concrete driveway there. They wash the fire engines and stuff like that, they wash them up there, so a lot of the pollution and stuff coming out, those things that they wash.
That's a challenge.
If that driveway is sloping in the other direction, does that mean it has to change?
So this sounds like something that's going to be a conversation for later on, to figure out how exactly we're using the space and figure out how to design it in a way that's really going to work. If we're getting a whole lot of really heavily polluted waters in there, that's going to be bad on the plants in there. And so that might mean I need to pick just the right plants that can really tolerate that, or it might mean maybe I should look at it. We do have a few other spots around the township hall here that would also be fine for everybody. So this isn't like my only spot necessarily where I'm going to install it.
So are there plants that handle the various soaps or the various petroleum distillate and fracked out stuff? Are there plants that will actually work on that and convert it?
Absolutely. Think about, what's that? The road salts are a big issue, yeah. There are plants that can handle those decently well. Think about, the next time you go into some larger city, look and see what plants are actually surviving there. And those are the plants that typically can handle it a little bit better in those really intense urban conditions. So there definitely are just a smaller palette of plants. Blue flag iris is a great example of a really gorgeous native plant that handles those conditions very, very well. So that's one I probably would end up using. Most everyone's familiar with an iris. It's got a really gorgeous bloom. It can handle the salts, it can handle the fluids, and it can handle water too. I'll take as many questions as
Are you using a lot of dogwoods also and river birches?
Dogwoods are great plants for rain gardens, river birches as well. Yeah, those are some great examples of rain garden plants. And woody plants as well. Most people think about gardens with herbaceous plants, but we can have all kinds of plants that will survive in those conditions. Yeah, and red osier dogwood's a gorgeous plant with bright red twigs. Yeah, it's a great plant.
Okay, Matt, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right. Next on the agenda is public comment. Yes, Wayne. Yeah.
Good evening, Board. Due to the significant impact the Urban Service District will have on the residents who live there, I'm once again requesting, as I did at the June meeting, that the Board hold a public meeting and invite all the residents of the USD to attend.
The meeting should be a question and answer informational meeting that will allow the residents of this district to have their questions answered and work with the board towards solutions. I'm also asking that you invite the township consultants to attend, attorneys, planning consultant, engineers, also a representative from Yucca, and anyone else you can think of who would be able to help. For quite some time, this board has done everything possible to accommodate developers in this district. It's time you represent the true stakeholders, the residents. Is there any plans for this board right now to hold this meeting with the residents that I've requested? This is the second time I've requested it.
No, there isn't. No. Okay. Anyone else?
Why not?
As of right now, there's not. But when the time comes, right now we're waiting for the financial conditions of how they're going to provide utilities to the district. And as of right now, nothing other than talk about the residential part that they have proposed. And we still have to get the development agreement signed. There hasn't been that signed. So they have a timeline that we have to provide. And also it is the responsibility, as we said, that, there's been planning commission meetings and board member meetings that have enlightened the public about what's going on. So there's nothing being hid. There's nothing being taken away from any of the residents. The main was, we're just waiting to see for this development agreement to come and it to be signed and to be agreed upon. And at that time, that's when they show us the money, so to say, then we have to react and act upon it. So that's what we're waiting for. Carl.
Will it be too late for the residents when you sign this, after you sign this agreement? I mean, what input would we have?
Basically, the development agreement is what's signing is when the money comes in, that this is what they have to do before they can do anything. As far as the utilities go, they have to have that agreement signed. Doesn't mean anything's going. Then at that point, like I say, you can talk about a lot of things. In fact, the township has talked about for years about something going to happen. If it was Johnson Controls, whatever it was, it's just that none of it has happened. And again, we know about the residential. We know that they have now bought the Magna property. So, they can buy the land and that, but then when it comes to the utilities, that has always been the big issue. So we are waiting to see how they're going to fund for the utilities. And that also comes with a development agreement that once the planning commission had passed it and also the board had passed it, that's what we are waiting for them to do. And the timeline is ticking. So that's what we're waiting for. Okay, anybody else? Okay.
I'm part of the planning commission, and I think that, we've had some criticisms from people who haven't attended the meetings, but we've had years of meetings on this, and it goes back to the past administration. We've resolved a lot of problems with that development, and we've held the developer to the task. The township has relieved itself legally from any responsibility for the sewers or for the water. It's a responsibility of the builder. We've looked at environmental issues. We've looked at the preserving of the trees and stuff in that development. We've looked at the issues of all the neighbors around. We've talked to all the neighbors in the whole area many times. There's been a lot of work done on it, and the township is in pretty good condition right now relevant to that. And like you said, until the builder takes action, we can't really get into all the finite details, but the preparation's there. We've done all the preparation work. It's been years of it. Meeting with all the planners, meeting with the developers, meeting with real estate consultants, and I think the township has done a tremendous job on this, and a lot of work that goes unrecognized, and I just wanted to make that statement.
Yes, Mr. Berry.
There's a lot of surveying activity going on North Territorial Road, south of North Territorial Road, between Old North Territorial and almost to Weed. The gentleman I spoke with said that they were determining the slope of the property adjacent to territorial. What purpose is that for?
The township was notified about surveying being done, as I said at the last meeting, that they have purchased that property. It's not Magna anymore, it's an individual who used to work for Magna. So they have sold that property, and therefore they're doing the surveying. I mean, there were a couple residents had heard the rumors and took the time to call me, and we talked with, someone said they're going to put warehousing, a lot of false information that's out there. So, and that's the thing to do, is that if you hear something that's false and you want to know something, I've always answered my phone, no matter who you are, and would love to have a conversation with you. If anybody lives in that district or around that district, but nothing has, but that's what they're doing. I mean, they own the property now, and they're surveying it and I'm sure down the road, whenever utilities come, they're going to have some kind of development that they're going to want to show us.
Is there any closer agreement with water and sewer?
Yeah, so the latest is the Yucca to reserve the capacity for the sewer district, which would service the whole USD. So there was a part, I don't know, maybe a year ago or whatever, that there was talk about them not having capacity because, I don't know if you read the paper, but Plymouth, they're talking about 5,000-6,000 jobs along the 5-mile corridor. You see the 5 and Beck Road, all that development. So the worry to us is that what happens if we don't have the capacity, and then they start talking about these wastewater treatment plants. And I think we already know that we do not want to be in the wastewater treatment plant, just with our little hamlet here and all the problems we're having here. So we felt that as a board that it was necessary for us to commit to that capacity, which was $30,000 a year, like an insurance policy, to make sure we have that capacity. But in the negotiations with Showstack to extend the timeline, they agreed with this development agreement, and also that they would agree to pay the capacity fee, which was only $21,000
$21,000 a year.
$21,000 a year to hold that capacity for us, so that it's there, so that if it does come, they figure out how to pay for it, and provide the financial backing of that we will have the capacity. And water really has never been an issue. It's at Ann Arbor Road and Napier area to hook in there. So there's been no actually contract that we have signed or done anything like that with the water, but the Yucca contract is the capacity that we've committed to. And it's bi-yearly. Or is it yearly, or is it?
Well, we have reserve capacity that will cost about $21,000. That may increase incrementally each year, but it's about $21,000. Right. It was $21,000 for the first year. And then only at that point, when the infrastructure is actually constructed and flow begins through the system to Yucca, will the township then begins paying on a flow basis of the amount of flow going through the pipes. But until then, it's just paying for reserve capacity.
Okay. Bill?
Perhaps this should be directed to the lawyer rather than the chair. Did I understand correctly that Showstack has agreed to pay the retainer, the cover, the holding, the 21, whatever, on a yearly basis until we have an agreement, or have they agreed that they will refund us when we have an agreement? First part. Second part, does that then give them legal claim to the reserve?
They have agreed in the PUD ordinance, when it was extended, to pay the reserve amount going forward after December of this year, for as long as that may take, until construction and flow begins.
And that will not then transfer a legal claim to that, such that if they back out and break down and don't do anything, we've got no reserve?
No, that doesn't give them any rights in the property. But they don't have any vested rights in the property development until they actually start construction.
Wayne?
Yes. I think what we were referring to, a number of people were referring to, is not the development agreement, but the sewer ordinance. And the sewer ordinance will significantly impact every resident that lives in the urban services district. And you said you communicated with all the residents in the district in regard to the sewer ordinance. I spoke to a number of the residents in the urban services district. Not one of them had any clue about the sewer ordinance or the meeting where the sewer ordinance was almost passed here in June, if it wasn't for Ypsilanti wanting to make some changes in there. So again, due to the significant impact that the sewer ordinance will have on the residents and the uncertainty that surrounds this ordinance, wouldn't it be the due diligence of this board, wouldn't it be incumbent on you? There's approximately 50 residents that live in the urban services district to have a town hall public forum, sit down with these people, explain, have a workshop, and try to work some of these issues out. Wouldn't that be in the best interest of everyone?
Hey, Gary, I was at the meeting over the summer, and they did talk about the urban service districts having the utilities out there. It was discussed. Do you remember that?
Yeah. As far as the ordinance, there's a lot of things that, and I'm not blaming past boards or whatever, which lane you were on, but there were other issues as far as not having the standards for utilities. You don't want to leave that wide open, which that's something else that we had to do as a board, was to take, you have you don't have standards where, somebody comes in and decides, well, hey, they find water, and they just say, well, these are our standards, you live with them. And so it's important that you have standards like that. And also, we talked about the sewer ordinance. That was brought up saying that we needed to pass the sewer ordinance, but at the same time, Yucca did have changes, and that we would bring it back to the public when we reach it. But nobody had even gone over the sewer ordinance when we brought it up. It was a part of that was on the board that were going to have discussion, and we discussed it that night. So it wasn't something that was going to just try to ramrod or get in. It's something that we need to discuss and have everybody participate in it. So, but it's important to have everything in line so that when the utilities come, that we are ready for it, how it's to be built, and also what's going to happen with residents who are there who want to tap into it or don't want to tap into it. And I've discussed with some residents, maybe not every resident, and my personal feeling is that nobody should have to tap into the system. This board has talked about it several times, the Planning Commission has talked about it, that if you don't want to tap into it, you shouldn't be forced to tap into it. If you look at the generic, ordinance that was brought to the table that night, that's what most communities do. When the utilities come in, these are the standards that people have to do. They're almost forced to tap in. We don't feel our residents we should do that, but as I've said to some of the residents, we need to make sure that when they want to tap in, that the location is so that they don't have to pay tons of money, like to bring the infrastructure to them. We need to make sure that the people who are in the USD have a way to tap into the system when their septic system fails or whatever, or if they sell and somebody wants public utilities. So that's all going to be discussed when that time comes. But still, have we heard anything back, Ed?
No, they haven't. To my knowledge, Yucca has not changed the Ypsilanti ordinance so that.
So just to make myself clear, the night that we brought that or put it on the agenda, it was a night to discuss about how we move forward on that. But Ypsilanti told us that there's no use even discussing it and talk about it until they have to review their ordinance and change it, because ours have to match similar to something that they have.
Correct.
If I've understood it right.
Yeah, Yucca has to approve our ordinance. And just to follow up what you were saying, Mr. Supervisor, as a result of that board discussion and community discussion we did have when the sewer ordinance was brought up, I have redrafted parts of the ordinance having to deal with hookups of those individuals that live in the USD, so that it won't be mandatory as soon as the sewer comes in, that everybody has to hook up. The way it's written now, and this is yet to be presented to the public, but the way it's written now, when it comes back, an individual living in the USD will not have to hook up until their septic system has failed to the point that the county says it has to be replaced.
Would you also consider in there that one of the stipulations you had in the ordinance is that as soon as the property owners sold their home, that the new owners would be required to hook up? And to me, that would put like a lien or a special assessment on the residents when they're selling their homes. And they would have to probably negotiate that into the cost of their home, which would absolutely put an undue burden on the people when they were selling a house. In addition to that, you were taking away the property rights of the people in that ordinance by not allowing them to utilize their secondary septic field area like everybody else in Salem Township has, except for the hamlet, obviously, that has sanitary sewer. So I think that should be restored in that contract as well.
As Mr. Supervisor indicated, everything is open for discussion at this point when the ordinance is brought back before the board.
Okay, anybody else?
As far as the sewer system is concerned, according to what it said in the Detroit News, that the corridor between Beck and Napier Road is going to have between 6,000 and 8,000 jobs. And the Hoco site is supposed to be light industrial. And it says it becomes part of the Michigan International Technology Center, Advanced Technology Business Park along 5 Mile Corridor in Plymouth and Northville. The vision involves high-tech firms in automotive, life science sectors, recreational space, business such as restaurants, supermarkets, and daycare centers to cater to those firms. Where are we going to get sewer? If Plymouth and Northville are going to have to do this, and it's supposed to be built out within 2 years. On the 27th of September, it goes out for bids to whoever's going to develop that project. Not going to be a lot of sewer left over.
Well, that's why we don't want a wastewater treatment plant if this ever happens. We do want, at least we preserve the capacity, so.
Hey, I'm going to change the subject. Where do we stand on the no-deal lawsuit right now?
Ed wants to comment on it, or go ahead.
It's litigation is still pending. Discovery in that case has been closed. Motions are being filed, and it'll be up to the court to decide how they want to address those motions.
Okay, anyone else? All right, consent agenda.
Mr. Supervisor, I move that Salem Township approve the following consent agenda items. We have the minutes of last month's regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. We have the disbursements for August of 2017. Out of the general fund, we have checks for $908,637.55. That's checks 26,935 to 26,999. We have payroll of $49,318.57. It cost us $210.61 through Paycor. Out of the sewer fund, we have checks for $6,844.98. Checks, two checks, 2014 and 15. Out of the escrow fund, we had checks for $15,363.75. That's check 1722 through 1724. Now, the total invoices for September that we will be writing next month, $104,848.78. And that breaks down the general fund of $96,498.10. Sewer fund, $6,291.18. And lastly, the escrow fund, $2,059.50. Second.
We have a second?
I'll second it.
Derek Converse, second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Consent agenda is passed. Okay, moving on down, we have the drain assessment. Mr. Converse.
Okay, whereas the following drains will be assessed on the 2017 tax roll to property owners in Salem County by the Washington County Drain Commission. And whereas the state drain code, section 280.200, allows the township to pay the drainage assessment from the general fund or other legal available funds. And whereas the entire township derives benefit from the control of surface water by the county drain system. Now therefore be it resolved that Salem Township agrees to pay the property owner's share in addition to the township portion of the above drain assessment in the amount not to exceed $8,000 as general fund distributions in lieu of placing the drain assessment on the 2017 tax roll.
Okay, I'll second it.
I'd like to, just for clarification to the rest of the board, the original motion that was presented said it not to exceed $8,000. I just got an email today at noon saying that they forgot to put a Johnson Creek drain on it for $1,052.96. And the Nelson drain went from $534.11 down to $197. So it really brought the total up to $7,555.67. So that way it was required for me to state that it was not to exceed $8,000.
So it's 8,000. Yes. So this is another great reason why we live in Salem Township, or we all live in Salem Township. Salem Township pays our drainage, so the county can come and assess your properties, but because of the income that the township has, the township pays these fees instead of assessing it to the residents who live near these drains. So.
In addition to it, we had a meeting, Mary and I had a meeting with the Drain Commission a couple of years ago, and what they do is they really go back through, clean the ditch banks up, clean the stream beds up, get the water flow properly, and basically clean the debris out of the streams, which is a major asset to the whole community, and not just the property owners. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do it.
Okay, any other discussion? Have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's passed. All right, Mr. Trent.
Mr. Supervisor, I move that Salem Township approve the purchase of the used SCBA filling system at the quoted price of $6,250 from R&R Fire Truck Repair, and authorize the additional expenses for electrical installation and air quality tests not to exceed $2,000.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Winsley? Okay, any discussion? Chief, you want to give us a little?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Supervisor. So the background on this was the city of Warren had received a federal grant to replace their SCBA, or their air bottle filling station, and R&R came across two of these, I would say, gently used SCBA filling stations. The fire department's never had one, so we've had to kind of go beg our neighbors when we have a fire to go fill our air bottles, which kind of puts us at a disadvantage should we catch a second fire or need the SCBA's, as well as the drive time and the effort to make that happen. And then unfortunately, most fires generally happen in the middle of the night, so it's not a good venture. So what we're hoping to do is purchase this used set that would get us down the road, and then do what the city of Warren did, is apply to the federal government and say, hey, we've got this wonderful SCBA system, but we'd like to have the newer ones that could meet the 2025 generation bottles when they come out, and ask for a grant, which you're much more likely to get a federal grant having a unit than going to the federal government and saying, hey, we would like to have this, because then they say, well, you lived without it, so why do we need to provide you something that you haven't had? If you have something and you say we want to upgrade, then the federal government generally looks more favorably on that. Don't know the logic behind it, but that's what worked for the city of Warren. And honestly, from the background, it's something we've needed for a long time, having that capability to fill air tanks, not just in fires, but our training evolutions and aspects of that. We have 50 bottles, and that's all we have. So when those get used, we got to fill them up, or we're at a disadvantage should we catch a fire, or whether a car or a house fire. that's why we're coming to the board saying, here's an opportunity. We did price out a new unit. It's about $35,000 for a brand new unit. And this one is at 6, so I think it's a good way for us to get it, our foot in the door, help us out and improve our department. So that's why I come to the board asking for their approval to purchase this item.
Okay, we have a second. Any other questions from the board? Okay, if not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, down to the tree mitigation fund. Now, before Mr. Winsley reads this, if you want to get up and get a cup of coffee or, I don't want to get anybody falling asleep or anything.
This is supposed to be here. All right, this is a resolution for the tree mitigation fund pursuant to the zoning ordinance, section 60.08. It's just one page. The township can establish a special revenue fund to account for the proceeds of the specific revenue sources that are legally restricted to expenditures for specific purposes. Whereas section 60.08D of the township zoning ordinance provides for tree and woodland protection on all parcels proposed for development. So this section, 60.08 of the township ordinance, requires the replacement of trees on the same parcel as when removed, and wherever feasible as determined by the township. But if a tree location or replacement is not feasible on that parcel or at another approved location within the township may elect to accept a deposit into a tree planting fund maintained by the township in an amount equal to or exceeding the total estimated cost for this tree replacement and maintenance that would otherwise be required. These funds must be used for planting, maintenance, and preservation of trees in woodland areas within the township. Whereas Salem Township Board of Trustees recognizes that providing funds to the township to enable the township to plant trees on public or private property helps to protect the natural environment and conserve natural resources in the township pursuant to the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, MCL 125.32 and 125.3203. This provides efficient mechanism for developers to provide off-site mitigation. Whereas in these situations where tree relocation or replacement is not feasible on the same parcel as removed trees, the Township Board of Trustees, being the highest level of decision-making authority within the township, wishes to establish a committed fund called the Tree Mitigation Fund for funds to be deposited with the township in lieu of on or off-site tree mitigation, and to be used only for the planting of maintenance and preservation of trees in woodland areas within the township. Whereas this tree mitigation fund will be established as part of the budget adopted by the Township Board pursuant to MCL 141.42. Now let it be resolved that the Salem Township Board will approve a committed fund and call it the Tree Mitigation Fund, effective for tonight.
Okay, I'll second it. Just a little, this is just basically when we're talking about development or the USD or wherever, if there isn't a proper place to, if there are trees coming down, to make sure that we protect the trees, and if they are removed, that they plant them somewhere else. But if there isn't a place to do it, that there will be a fund or a charge that only can be spent on, that money can only be spent on planting trees wherever the township sees fit. So that's not in our ordinance, but it's something that needs to be in our ordinance wherever the development happens. Any comments on that, Ed? Did I say it right? Or
No, that was a pretty good summary. It's a very fancy resolution, basically just to establish a separate fund for tree mitigation. When we have an ordinance that requires extensive tree mitigation in the township. Basically, whenever trees is removed off property that's going to be developed, it has to be replaced. So this issue came up because we have a Showstacks residential development coming up, and they have, they will replace as many trees as they can. Those that can't, the township has the option to place them someplace else. If there's no place that no other feasible place for the township to place those trees, then the developer can pay into a tree mitigation fund to set those funds aside to be used by the township in the future to plant trees wherever the township decides to plant them. We realized, although our ordinance states all this, we didn't actually have a separate fund to put those dollars into when the developer wants to give them to us. So the whole purpose of this is just to establish a committed or restricted fund that will be used only for tree mitigation in the township.
Very good. Why don't we do the roll call?
Sure. Converse?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Reggie is absent. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Trent?
Yes.
Wensley, yes, and Whitaker?
Yes. Okay, down to financials. Budget amendment is Winslow.
I move that Salem Township approve the following cost center budget amendment for this current fiscal year. As you see on the motion, we have a chart of account called Highways and Streets 446.818.006. This currently has a budget of $400,000. We are revising this budget to $870,000. So we are increasing this by $470,000. And this balance of the fund, the balance of this money is coming from our general fund reserves. So it's a simple budget amendment. And as a board, we approved all of the maintenance and all of the extra projects in the last few months. So we've got to correct our budget now to
For the roads.
for the roads, yes.
Right. Okay, we have a second on this?
I'll second.
TJ? Any other questions about it?
Yes, Mr. Supervisor. I just noted on the revenue expenditure report that with the bills that we received from Washtenaw County last month, that our total year-to-date expenditure now is at $890,000. And so I would advise Mr. Winslow that we should modify his motion to
890.
or possibly more. And to that point, Mr. Supervisor, has Washtenaw County completed all of the projects that we authorized earlier in the year? And do we have other bills that we anticipate that may show?
They haven't completed them all yet. But I thought we had what's the budget for the roads? Is it 9 something?
Well, the current budget will be $870,000, but are you saying that you might need to add in, David, are you saying we might need to add an extra 20, or?
Yeah, I see. Yeah, you're just covering that one line item.
Right.
I was looking at the total cost center, that includes other items, but yeah, you would be okay at this point.
Yeah.
All right.
At this point.
All right, any other discussion? All right. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Down to reports. Some of it's been submitted there in our board packets. Down to the fire department. Chief Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I just got a few things. In the board packet, there was 38 calls for the month of August. Most of those, again, were medicals related to medical response time, 6 minutes, 35 seconds average. We had, I'd say, 3 significant events in the last month or so. The first one, we had as indicated in the sheriff's report, we had a sudden cardiac arrest right in front of the deputy. That the patient unfortunately didn't survive. I'm sure that was pretty traumatic for the deputy. But again, CPR was started almost immediately. The other two events we had a car fire on M14 just west of Goffertson, right at rush hour on Friday. So we pretty much, the brush truck 9-4 responded there as the first arriving apparatus on scene and was able to stop the fire before it got into the passenger compartment. Although the vehicle is still a loss, but tells you how effective those small trucks are getting out there quicker than the fire apparatus. And the other thing is we shut the freeway down because as soon as we apply water, pretty much all the visibility goes down. And we're having some challenges with people driving around the fire apparatus when we're blocking roads like that. It puts the people driving around the fire apparatus at hazard, as well as the firefighters doing what they need to do. And the third incident that I would mention is just, again, last Friday, we had a rollover garbage truck going down the entrance ramp to M14 at Goffertson, and that was shut down from probably like about 4 o'clock to late in the evening to get the heavy-duty trucks, because it was loaded with garbage, to get it back upright. Again, we had people driving around the shutdown that we had with the fire trucks. We asked the public not to do that. That's for their safety and our safety. And then the other thing is we're trying to get NIXL alerts out, because I think that the M14 car fire, I think traffic was pretty much backed up to almost 275. So, and I think there were some accidents in like Beck Road area. So at rush hour seems to always happen, and Fridays, just patience, I think. One thing I did forget to mention, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize that today's Furman's birthday. Happy birthday, Furman. You're going to outlive us all.
Are you a century then?
Lastly, I want to say that Washtenaw County is part of the Mavis agreement, which we all signed as Salem Township as part of the Mavis box cards. Because of that, we're part of that group. Task Force 1, Michigan Task Force 1 sent firefighters from this state to Florida to deal with the hurricane. We had firefighters coming right out of this county that were part of that task force that are left a couple days ago, that are down in Florida right now working on search and rescue, swift water rescue, and I think they sent some paramedics and doctors down there as well. So we do have firefighters in the area from here that are helping out, so just keep them in their prayers, and hopefully Florida gets back on their feet, as well as Texas. That's all I have to report.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, now to board discussion. We have the Hamlet streetscape improvements. So we can have some discussion on this. The Planning Commission at their last meeting, I'm not sure, it was a motion, correct, TJ?
Yes.
TJ to pass it up to our board to talk about the street scaping here in the hamlet. There's been just some basic estimates on what it would cost as far as sidewalks on both sides, some street lighting, like street poles, old-fashioned street poles to kind of keep in the character of our town, to just give the hamlet a facelift. Now it's on our plate. So just a few suggestions I have is that I think we should have somewhat of a steering committee to get the ball rolling on this. Some of the estimated costs that came in from our engineers was roughly $350,000, $400,000 to just, now that the road has been fixed, to put the streetscaping in with some trees. There'd still be some parking on there the way they have it drawn up for us that I've seen some pictures of. And so I think this is a beginning of taking something. We can't help but mention of what's going on in the hamlet right now. The new owners of the store keep improving. You see the post office down here that's striking when you come through our town. You see the McVeigh family, they live on Curry Road, that have bought this, I call it the greenhouse. It's not a greenhouse, but it was a color green that really needed an overhaul, and it's amazing what they have done to it so far, just springing it back up. So if you haven't seen that, that's the large house across the street here, down the road. And so these little things will just help. I mean, we're not talking, like Plymouth or Northville, but it's one of the last hamlets that I think that, all of us who live here and have an investment in our town should look at this town and say, it's one of these towns that we need to make sure to give this a facelift and be behind it, and just be proud of it when we drive through. So I think that's something that we should look at and make some decisions of what we need to do. The other thing I'd like to throw in there would be also with the Mueller House, which we call, it's right next to the little park here the township owns. It's the Brown House out there. And there's been talk, for several years about what do we do with it. It's just empty. The thought has always been, I've talked to the Brighton Post, who uses the Ryder House across the parking lot here, where you see all the state troopers' cars there, to have them consider, and they've agreed to move them out on the front, out on where, house them in the Mueller House, and then use the Ryder House kind of back to when we're going to need some more offices and stuff. We'll let the township use that. So I think that, that to have a facelift on that house and put the police out there, have the cars more visible on 6 Mile as people come through the hamlet to see that just the presence of cars sometimes makes a deterrent for those who are coming into our town with the wrong reasons or whatever. So anything, the truck ordinance has been working. I don't think we've given, or I haven't heard about any tickets handed out yet, but most of the companies, it's been on hard on some of them, and I know, and I just appreciate their cooperation in it. It's difficult going out the 5 Mile corridor like they have, but it has made a big improvement. I've heard a lot of the people that live in the hamlet here. It's much quieter, and so we need to appreciate our business owners that are understanding what we had to do with all the other roads being shut down around. So, any other discussion on any other ideas or?
I'd like to ask TJ, since I didn't go to any of the planning commission meetings on this, is there zoning in the hamlet for more businesses to be along the road if we spend this money, or is it still all just residential?
No, there can be businesses in the hamlet. You look in the zoning ordinance, small ones that would be focused to serve the local community, certain shops, restaurant, some office buildings. But it would be, it's been in the master plan for a long time to improve it. The last one, there was like really fancy pictures and everything, and nothing has been ever done. And to attract some of these small businesses, it would be nice to have a little restaurant, so that like people in the township all know, hey, this is a gathering place for our community. But it needs to be improved. You can't expect the businesses to come in the way it is now, hoping that there'll be improvements there.
Right.
So, and then, traffic, I've heard traffic flies through, and the road is right next to some of these businesses. By doing some of the traffic calming things that are in here, it would visually slow down the traffic. By putting lights, benches, some streetscapes, some trees, it would better differentiate the area.
I think where they were talking about, or from what I hear, what the engineers, what I'd seen, is that they talked about from the railroad track to almost the church as a kind of a phase. And The other problem I still see is when you get to go east on the other side of the tracks, then it becomes 40 miles an hour in that little stretch where it's heavy industrial on one side, some residential on the north side, but then there's some light industrial over there too, so. But we need to work on the speed. The road commission is supposed to give us, I've asked them, I don't know how many times, I can show you the emails, whatever, back and forth, but they have not come up with a price yet on putting one of that detects your speed. They're small, they're run by solar, they can be put up where they're not so long, but it will kind of track people coming through. If I see Dale come down from Curry Road, he's gotta be going 50. No, but but anyway, so that's kind of, anybody else has any suggestions or whatever as far as, well, we need to get a steering committee and let's just stop, I think, talking about it. I think we need to do something about it. So, and I told you the estimates, Greg, the estimates were roughly $350,000, $400,000. I still think that the Mueller House is going to be probably $100,000 to revamp that. And but again, I'd like to make a comment on the budget. You know, we might have a budget and set it out there for, but we are always taking money and putting it back in. So I think we came in. We had when we came into office, we were what, $7.5 million. We have 860. Plus we have a piece of property that is purchased that goes up in value every day. So anyway, I think we're in good shape to do something like this to make improvement in our town. So maybe next month we can come up with a steering committee plan.
The only thing that I would thought about is prioritizing which one you think should be done first and which ones, if budget issues, is the whole thing. Because I think something should be done, but I don't know if, depending on the timeline.
All right, any other discussion? All right, any general updates you want to talk about? I think we kind of talked about everything. All right, we're down to public comment. Jim.
Excuse me. Yes, I have two things. I remember what I had to write it down. One is on your police department ideas. I've been asking for them to look at, go down there and sit down on Curry Road where they zoom by us at who knows what speed. You think you like your hand to get your mail out of your mailbox. They have no respect for anybody on the road there. You can't see out very well when you're coming out. A lot of it's wood covered along the ditches. And I noticed that 2 weeks ago they were doing they had a whole squad of cars down here between Curry Road and here, ticketing people, and we've been trying to get them to come up there. Why can't they park a few cars up there instead of over here? Keep, maybe cool some people's heart how fast they're driving down there. The other one is the trucks. Well, I'm glad that the hamlet has got quieter. On Curry Road, we picked up